Good morning, everyone. Today, I, Rapunzel Barog, together with my fellow reporters, Edgelyn Baroa, Anna Lumolo, and Glidey Ann Rafal, will present to you the respiratory system. So, the respiratory system, it is the organ system animals use to bring in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. So, we call the process of bringing in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide breathing. So when we are inhaling, we are taking in oxygen, and when we are exhaling, we release carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of the cellular respiration and metabolism. Now, respiration is an everyday term that is often used to mean breathing. So even though it is often used to mean breathing, respiration is different from breathing, because breathing is the process of inhaling and exhaling of the gases or taking in oxygen, expelling carbon dioxide, while respiration is the process where the body breaks down the oxygen so that cells can create energy. Now, cellular respiration is the aerobic breakdown of glucose in the mitochondria to make ATP. So when we say aerobic, it means the use of oxygen. So cellular respiration uses oxygen to break down food molecules to get chemical energy for cell functions. This means that it is one of the processes of respiration where it takes oxygen from the inhaled ones that is carried by blood to the cells in the tissues. So glucose breaks into carbon dioxide and water by using oxygen. So the energy is produced by this and is stored in ATP molecules. So this process is important to metabolism. Now let's go to what does respiratory do. So the process of smelling or olfaction begins with olfactory fibers that line the nasal cavities inside the nose. So when air enters the cavities or the nasal cavities, some chemicals in the air bind to activate nervous system receptors on the cilia. So it allows us to talk and to smell. So how? When we exhale, air goes from our lungs to the larynx, which is commonly known as the voice box. And when air moves through the vocal cords, they vibrate, and that creates sound. It also warms air to match our body temperature and moisturizes it to the humidity level our body needs. It also delivers oxygen to the cells in our body, removes waste gases including carbon dioxide from the body when we exhale in the process of cellular respiration and metabolism. Lastly, it protects our airways from harmful substances and irritants. So how? So the mucus layer traps pathogens or potentially infectious microorganisms and other particles, preventing them from reacting the lungs. So cilia beats more than 1,000 times a minute, moving the mucus that lines the trachea upwards about 0.5 to 1 centimeter per minute. So across the diversity of life, various respiratory structures have developed, including the lungs and airways of air-breathing vertebrates, the gills of fishes, and many invertebrates, and the specialized air ducts, trachea, of insects. But with regard to vertebrates, the lungs and gills are the two most important structures involved in the phase known as external respiration, or gaseous exchanges between blood and environment. Internal respiration refers to the gaseous exchanges that occur between the blood and cells. This means that external respiration, or commonly known as breathing, is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between an animal and its environment. It takes place in the alveoli in lungs, where it takes in oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide. While internal respiration is the process of diffusing oxygen from the blood into the interstitial fluid and into the cells. So it occurs in the metabolizing tissues, where oxygen diffuses out of the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the cells.
Respiratory system in different organisms. So, fine example of this is the human respiratory system. Breathing starts with the movement of air through our mouth and nostrils. The human respiratory system begins at the trachea. It starts at the back of our mouth and nose and then splits into two tubes called bronchi. Each bronchus splits off many times to form smaller tubes called bronchioles. These bronchioles form a complex network of millions of little tubes that lead to sacs called alveoli. This complex network of tubes and sacs from the lungs. So our lungs as well as our heart are located in our chest, also known as our thorax. These organs are protected by a frame of bones called ribcage. The diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, where the stomach and intestines are found. It is large, dome-shaped muscles located below the ribcage. So let's move on to ventilation. Ventilation is the process by which air is pulled in and pushed out of the lungs. The main muscle responsible for ventilation is the diaphragm. It is helped the intercostal muscles, which are the muscles between our ribs. Two phases of ventilation. Inhalation. The diaphragm and intercostal muscles contract. Exhalation. The diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax. So, ventilation is done by controlling the volume of the thoracic cavity, which is the space where our lungs are found, and diaphragm is responsible for ventilation. So there are two phases of ventilation. The inhalation, where when we breathe in, the diaphragm and intercostal muscles contract. Increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity causes air to rush into the lungs. And the exhalation, where when we breathe air out, the diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax, causing the space in the thoracic cavity to get smaller, so air is forced out of the lungs. Now, let's move on to gas exchange. So, gas exchange is the process of absorbing oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. All animals use a gas exchange to breathe. There are some differences, though, in the organs and molecules that make it happen. So how does gas exchange occur? When an oxygen molecule is inhaled, it moves into the respiratory system through the mouth or nose. It then passes through the trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles and into an alveolus. In the alveolus, the oxygen diffuses into the blood in the surrounding capillaries. Now, the oxygenated blood is then sent from the lungs to the heart, which pumps it to the rest of the body through the arteries. Arteries branch out into all parts of the body and get smaller until they become capillaries. Here, oxygen diffuses from the blood to the body cells that need it. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood increases as cells produce it as a waste. This causes it to diffuse into the blood. The carbon dioxide is carried by the red blood cells through the veins to the lungs. The lungs have low concentration of carbon dioxide compared to blood. This is why carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveoli of the lungs. From there it passes through the bronchioles, bronchi, and trachea to leave the body through the nose or mouth. This is the process of exhalation.
Let's go to non-mammalian respiratory system. Unicellular organism. The respiratory of the unicellular organism occurs to the plasma membrane. How does this happen? So for example, the organism amoeba where exchange of gases take place through cell surface. They absorb oxygen from the surrounding air and water and give out carbon dioxide through plasma membrane by diffusion. So when we say diffusion, it is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, let's move on to annelids where respiration occurs through body wall and skin. This means that organisms like tapeworm, earthworms, and leeches use their skin for the exchange of gases. The skin of earthworm is very thin and moistened. Many blood cells are spread on the skin. These blood cells are known as capillaries. The exchange of gases occurs at capillaries. They die of suffocation if their skin is dried up.
Now the insects, where it is through tracheal system. In insects like cockroaches and grasshoppers, transportation of gas or gaseous exchange takes place by a special type of fine tube called trachea. Air containing oxygen enters through the spiracles into a tracheal tubes. Spiracles are an opening or tiny pores on the surface of some animals. It then diffuses into the body tissues and reaches every cell in the body. carbon dioxide released from the cells goes into the tracheal tubes and comes out through spiracle. Avian respiration in birds. In birds' lungs, the air only flows in one direction. The air sacs allow a continuous stream for airflow through the lungs. The lungs of the birds are organized differently than those of humans. In human lungs, the air moves both in and out. Avian respiratory system exchanges oxygen and carbon dioxide between gas and blood, utilizing a relatively small, rigid flow-through lung and a system of air sacs that act as bellows to move the gas through the lung. How avian respiration is different from that of mammals. The mammalian lungs have reciprocating ventilation with large terminal air spaces, or what we call the alveoli, while avian lung has a flow-through system with small air capillaries. As a result, the environment of the pulmonary capillaries is very different between mammals and birds. Next, we have reptiles. Reptiles are the air-breathing, cold-blooded vertebrates that have scaly bodies rather than hair or feathers. Most reptiles, except for the crocodile family, don't have a diaphragm. They have evolved different ways to inflate their lungs. Many reptiles and amphibians use their throat muscles to gulp air in the process of buccal pumping. Buccal pumping is a method of ventilation used in respiration in which the animals move the floor of its mouth in a rhythmic manner which is externally apparent. It so means that inflating the lungs in amphibians. The example of buccal pumping is agami desert lizard Eurymatix egyptius microlepis. Next, we have cloacal breathing. Some aquatic species can even use the cloaca to breathe. The cloaca is external opening used for solid, liquid excretion and access to reproductive system.
Amphibians. Amphibians are animals that have adapted to living both on land and in water. This group includes frogs, toads, salamander, living in water to living in land under respiratory change. In their juvenile forms, they have gills, but as they grow to their adult form, gills disappear and lungs develop to replace them. Some species of salamander remains aquatic. However, gills although their lines, we call keeping characteristic of the larval stage mutiny. In addition to buccal pumping, amphibians also use continuous respiration. This means that the gas exchange happens through the animal's skin.
Now let's move on to fishes. So like frog larvae and mud puppies, fish have gills. So gills are similar to lungs in that they have branches that split. So gill arches branch to form gill filaments, and the gill filaments are gill lamellae, which is where gas exchange occurs. Where here oxygen dissolved in water diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses into the water. So in bony fishes, a bony plate called an operculum covers and protects the fragile gills. So in cartilaginous fishes, such as sharks and rays, the gills are located near their 5 to 7 gill slits. So during inhalation phase, fish pull water in through their oral valve to their buccal cavity. From there, the water is pushed towards their gills. The opercular valve is closed at this point, and during the exhalation phase, the oral valve is closed and the opercular valve is open. So water passes over the gills and out through the opercular valve. But do you know some fishes have specialized muscles that allow them to pump the water over their gills? And fish that are very active use a type of ventilation called ram ventilation. So, run ventilation constitutes swimming in relatively straight lines at a high rate of speed with the mouth open. Moving forward forces water to move over the gill arches so that carbon dioxide and oxygen can be exchanged. So sharks are a type of fish that use this. This is why some species of shark can actually drown if they stop moving. So an example of shark that uses rump ventilation is a reef shark.